SK Vibemaker.
Today in the virtual room, I'm just here. I'm in the virtual room. I got Fraser T Smith, man. How about
We're
that?
here. We're here. We're virtual, but we're
Yeah,
live.
for sure. His settings look a lot more better than mine, but I'm not mad. It's
Oh,
all right.
really?
Yeah,
No, I don't
man.
know. But you got more vinyl than I have.
Yeah, they just take up space. That's all they do. They're not even helpful. They're like books on the shelves. They never come off. They
Do you
just stay
not? Do you
there.
not play them?
I don't play my vinyl. No way.
What, is it all in the shrink wrap still, or what?
I actually bought these shrink
Collector's
wraps.
pieces.
No, I bought the shrink wraps recently to protect the vinyl because the lighting is going to make it fade. So that was a bit of a geeky thing. But
It's good artwork though.
now what's very strange is that we've never met. I've never met in person, and we're meeting
I
in the
can't
virtual
believe
room
that.
today. Yeah, man, it's very strange. It's just one of those things.
I've been a big fan. You've been pushing some great music through the airwaves, man, for a long time. So I'm pleased to be here and meet you properly, you know.
Now I want to say congratulations on such an art piece, man. Future Utopia, the debut album from yourself. Let's talk about it from the beginning, man. 12 questions. Where does the Future Utopia, aka Alias, come from? I know it's your label, and talk to me in detail about the album, man.
I came to what I considered the end of the most amazing run working on Kano's Made in the Manor, Stormzy's Gang Signs and Prayer, and then Dave's Psychodrama with two Dave EPs in the mix. And we moved out of London, and I just thought I really didn't want to repeat myself creatively. So I really didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, was I going to do music for films? Was I going to make a documentary? I always want to do stuff that pushes me. So I started reading way more news and checking really what was going on in the world, and I started to feel pretty anxious. So I was going into the studio and just making music, and as I always do, I had this whiteboard in the studio, and I just started writing out these questions that became the 12 questions, from do we really care to why are we divided when we're so connected, how much is enough, what's the cost of freedom. And I wasn't too sure what I was going to do with the questions, but I knew they were powerful. And then I thought, well, it was never really on the cards to make a solo record, so to speak, but I knew it was a project. There was a project in there somewhere. And then piece by piece, the story unfolded where I thought, I'm just going to go and interview the most incredible, the sharpest minds from activism and poetry and rap and singing and just get their take on these questions. And that's what's resulted in the 12 Questions album. And in terms of Future Utopia, I didn't want it to feel like this was a producer record where people would see the credits and go, well, okay, we kind of know what to expect. I wanted to leave people guessing a little bit, and to feel that Future Utopia was a project like the Gorillaz or Massive Attack, that could be something in the future that could change up completely. It could be that it's other people producing the music and I'm coming with the concepts, or I don't know, I'm the keyboard player in the band or something, just I could switch it up rather than it being too focused on me.
Now I want people to understand like your history, man. You have a deep history. You have some crazy credits, man. I have to actually like look at the reference because it's very long. I'm gonna say some of the big hitters, man. You've got credits and production with Stormzy, Adele, Kano, Dave, Tinchy Stryder, Sam Smith. That's just to name a few. Where do we start with the Fraser T Smith story? I know that you began as a guitarist and as a solo musician in pubs and clubs and stuff like that, but where does it begin?
Depends how far you want to go back. I mean, it begins as a very young kid loving music. My parents weren't musically trained, but there was always a lot of music in the house. My nan was from South London and she played the piano, so I loved to go and see, like the very old school playing in the pubs kind of thing, where people would gather around the piano and in those like old school pubs. So I just had this love of music, and when I went to school I was in bands, and then was able to follow the guitar path through and play music with some like legends like Rick Wakeman and people like Tony Hadley from Spandau Ballet, and just learn about music, I think. And I didn't really, to be honest, I didn't really know what a producer was until I was in my 20s. And then when the penny dropped, I was like, wow, this is me, because I grew up listening to like rock music, but also early Run DMC and Public Enemy, NWA, and but Joy Division and New Order, and just this crazy mix of lots of different types of music.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was getting into production, and then I met Craig David when he was 17,
Mm-hmm.
and I heard he gave me a cassette with these 4 tracks on, and I was immediately a bit reticent to work with him because I was so getting into the production. And then I put the cassette on, and it was, I'm not sure about the order, but I remember the songs clearly: Fill Me In, Rewind, 7 Days, and Walking Away.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
heard those 4 songs, and I just got back to, I just said, look, we've got to make music. We've got to, I just want to, because what he was doing, I was getting into the garage scene, had that garage influence, but the guitars that Mark Hill had done on the record really spoke to me. So we went on this like crazy journey for about 5 years, playing all the TV shows and writing and doing remixes together. And then at that point, 5 years later, I said to Craig, look, I really need to get back into the production. And I was about 27 at that time. And then started working with Kano on his first album and Plan B. Craig, being like you, being like me, is just a lover of music. So he would say, why don't we go into some D12 like
Mm-hmm.
riff in the middle of Fill Me In? And he'd
Mm-hmm.
like really keep me on my toes. And then we'd be like just freestyling when he go
Mm-hmm.
into raps, and that really kept it fresh. He
So,
introduced me to loads of R&B and really helped me with my production as well, because he'd be playing like Joe records, like Table for Two, and saying, I really want my vocal to sound like this. And I mean,
mm-hmm.
production on those records is crazy.
When was the point which you felt like a very serious producer and songwriter? Do you remember that point?
5 years time.
Five. You don't feel like it. You don't feel like it yet.
I don't know, SK. I struggle a lot, with like imposter syndrome sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working with great artists, you sort of feel like, when you've got Stormzy in the room, or you've got Dave or Kano or Craig or Adele, you kind of feel like it's them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so for me to put this record together has been a massive like learning curve for me. But
Mm-hmm.
still, I look at art sometimes, and I look at like my wife's a sculptor, and I look at the sculptures that she does, and they're so perfect, and they're so like all her. Yet everything that I do seems to be, I'm not trying to put myself down, but because I'm very proud of everything that I've done, but I'm very sometimes lacking in confidence in
Mm-hmm.
terms of my own stuff. I can look at look at the Grammy or whatever, but I'm like, yeah, but that was Adele. You
Mm-hmm.
played the piano and you came with the beat and whatever, but that's a weird one. It's a weird one. So but I think it keeps me hungry. So I just keep learning and keep grounded, because that's the good thing about imposter syndrome, I guess.
I think you've definitely undeniably been a major contributor, and I think that with you being so humble, I think it's a testament to us all being students of the game. Do you know what I mean? Knowing that we want to do more, we want to keep going, and we're very passionate, and that's what I see about you, man,
Yeah,
which is a good
yeah,
thing. You know what
yeah.
I'm
No, it's
saying?
true. I get up early in the morning. I just want to smash it, but I guess because I'm in some ways like doubting my own skill, but I also want to become, a real great beat maker, a great studier of all sorts of music, a great jazz player, a great human. And it just, I'm so far off. That keeps me going back to the drawing board.
Touching on you being so involved in the studio, very hands-on with the 360 when it comes to the production and the writing, how much of a challenge can that be when some artists are very up for the input and some artists are very like, I want to do everything myself? How have you found that dynamic when working with all the artists you've worked with?
I don't have any set way of working. So I think the thing is to be fluid as a producer, and to know when to step back, but to know when to move in. So it's almost like a midfield sort of role, in that the artist or the striker. So you're laying the ball forward, but sometimes you need to go back into defense. You know, you need to be back for those corners where people are attacking you, but then you might need to play a long ball up, or it's that sort of role where you're all over the pitch. And I mean, sometimes it's just you might need to have a long conversation. You might be the T-boy, but also you might be the guy making the beat, recording the vocals. So I think it's important for me to work out where each artist is really coming from.
I feel like you can give some key advice to a lot of upcoming producers right now. You got producers, young producers, they might even be like 14, 15, sitting down in their room right now, just getting some software, maybe not having too much hardware. What are some of the key parts, in your opinion, to getting yourself in the game? Very important parts to, getting your setup right.
I think it's important to develop your ear more than anything, because I think if we're honest, you can draw notes in, and I do that and appreciate that, into a program, and you can make banging beats, and that's one thing. But it's a kind of form of programming, it's computer programming. But the thing for me is that if you can get the blend of that and make sure that your beats are banging, but also develop some kind of musicality, or the most musicality you can, but to just grab a little keyboard or an acoustic guitar and just to feel that connection with an instrument, feel those vibrations, and just feel it, then that to me is where the real magic comes in. It doesn't mean that you have to be playing guitar on a track, but then just when you listen to some vinyl, you're picking out a sample, or you're hearing other people's music, you feel like you can really get into it.
What about the other side of things when it comes to the business? What do you think are some of the early parts of business that budding producers need to take care of very early?
I think there's a lot of information online now where you can read books and you can study. I think it's just being aware of the game and how you should be paid, and the rights that should be protected, and I think that the rights societies now are very open in showing younger producers and young songwriters how it should be done. So, but I think you really need to take care of that, because you can make big records when you're 17, and you want to make sure that you're still getting paid for those when you're in your 60s and your 70s.
Straight up, the residuals.
The residuals.
Let me ask your take on your 20 years plus involved in this MC driven culture in the UK, whether it's been rap or it's been grime. There's been a lot of change in that time. We've come out of a period where a lot of artists weren't getting success. What we've seen over the last 10 years has been the best period that UK rap, UK MC driven culture has ever seen. But before that, there was the noughties and there was the 90s, and there were a lot of artists that were out here. What's your take on the evolution and the growth over the last few decades since the 90s?
Well, I think that what's important to me is that the culture has remained, and I think that the artists have had control to come up with the most amazing records, and I think that that's where things have changed. Before, like when I first started out, it was like Kano was in an underground culture, and then there was Tinchy that became very overground, but with that came certain aspects of the music that we had to chop. We had to make sure that the raps weren't too long. We had to make sure that there was so much melody going on in those records for Tinchy to get played. Whereas now it feels like artists can be completely themselves and can completely dictate the kind of music they want to make without too many gatekeepers getting in the way. And I think that that's where the doors have opened for the Stormzys and the Daves and Kano's new wave. It keeps going on to this new wave, the Husses, the newer rappers in the game to be really expressing themselves. And that's the best thing for me. Like you said, like this last 10 years has been the golden age, because it's all about expression, and within those lyrics come really important things that these great artists are saying, and that pushes socio-economic things forward. And that when you get platforms like Dave did and Stormzy did the year before at the Brits to say the kind of things that they're saying, then it gets even even greater than art, if there is such a thing, but to stray into politics and way bigger topics, I think is the most incredible thing.
You and Tinchy had a great relationship, a great partnership, and that run 2009, 2010, where you produced all those singles for him, and he became like the biggest UK male selling artist of the year. I think 2009 or 2010 was fantastic. Now take us back to the beginnings of when you met Tinchy Stryder. How did that happen?
I met him backstage at a Kano gig I was at, and I really got on with him, and I'd heard the stuff that he was doing, and I could see that he wanted to push things into the mainstream. I could tell he had that hunger for that. So the first session that we did was me, Kano, and Tinchy, and we wrote Strider Man. And we could see where that got to. I think it got to like 16 in the charts. And that was all good. Like I was happy with that. I also then had a record out with Craig David and Kano called This Is the Girl. And could see, I was really frustrated that wasn't played on Capitol, because to me that felt like a blend of two worlds. It was at 140, and it felt like it had the Craig sort of R&B, but it had the Kane's verses, and it felt like, to me, that was a record that could have become this like hybrid. But it was weird that the daytime radio, I mean, Radio 1 were always supported, but the other kind of commercial radio stations weren't coming up on board, and they wanted to play US rap. So I knew how far we had to push it when Tinchy, we went in with Tinchy and wrote Take Me Back with Tayo Cruz. And I felt that we had to go super commercial to try and break down some of the doors that were in the way of certainly Tinchy and a lot of other UK rappers.
And that definitely birthed a golden era and a very successful period for yourself and for Tinchy. Was it, what I mean? Shouts to Tinchy, man. We talk all the time.
Love that guy.
Kano, you was involved in his debut album, Home Sweet Home. A lot of production credits on there. Typical Me being one in particular. Talk to me about the beginnings of your friendship, your relationship, and meeting Kano.
Kano came in, his manager, who's now a great friend, Richard Thomas, called me and said, look, I've got this guy I want you to meet. He wants a guitar track. So I was just coming off the back of working with Craig David, and yeah, guitar was my thing, and was getting heavily into production. So Kane walked into the studio. He traveled on the overground from Canning Town right over through Willesden to Acton, where my studio was at the time, and walked in and was like this shy guy that I could tell there was something about him that I thought, I don't know, I just felt, when you meet someone, you think, I bet you're going to be good. I know you're going to be good, but you're not saying much. But I could just, I've got this feeling. And we got talking, and Kane said, yeah, I want to do this guitar track. I said, well, I had loads of guitars around my studio as I do now. So I started playing some different guitars, and he said, no, not really that, not that, not that. Then I played this like heavy rock riff. I said, well, is this sort of thing you want? He said, yeah, that's it. Like a 99 Problems kind of guitar thing. So I said, well, okay, we can definitely do that. But I said, in terms of the beat, like what kind of thing are you thinking? Like, I know hip hop, but like what's grime? I didn't really know what grime was at the time. It was very early days for that. And he started describing it, and we realized that we had a mutual love of garage. And he said, it's got that kind of that speed. It's got like elements of R&B, elements of hip hop. I said, well, I get it, but why don't you just tap out a beat on the drum machine? It's that drum machine behind me, the MPC. So he tapped out this beat. It was like dun, 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 dun. And I literally did that for like 2 hours. And I grabbed the guitar and came up with the and I don't really know whether he liked it or not. I just thought, well, we're getting something. So we put it down, and then he sat on the sofa for about 3 hours without saying anything. And then eventually he said, yeah, I'm ready to go in the booth. Well, I say the booth, but it was more like a division. You know, you get those early booths. It's
Yeah.
like the booth is just the other bit of the room with like a mattress up to
Straight
like
up.
divide that.
Yeah.
One of those ones, and laid it down, and it was something very special.
And that was that. And you've had a great relationship working on many of his albums since then.
Yeah, yeah, I love that guy so much. You know, I think, well, Richard told me the other day that I've done more stuff with Kane than any other producer. I'm like the most prolific producer with Kane, which just made me very happy
And I
because
think right behind you is probably Mikey J, right?
yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I thought Mikey was going to pin me to the post actually. So I've got to keep my eye on that guy and make sure he's not making some secret tracks with Kane in
Yeah.
lockdown.
Shouts to Mikey. So Freedom also features Albert Woodfox, who is a former Black Panther and was in solitary confinement for over 40 years locked up. I don't know how you got in contact with him, how the conversations began, but his contribution to Freedom was immense. So how did that happen? You getting in contact with him?
Well, I read a story in the newspaper and then Googled him and read up more and more about him. And then we managed to get in touch with him through a lady called Marina that lives in Hawaii, and she had helped free him because I mean he didn't even know that it was going to be 43 years. He thought he was in there indefinitely, and then she campaigned with a couple of other people for the authorities to look at the Angola Three because there were three men in prison for that amount of time, and so she was really instrumental in helping him get released. And she put me in contact with him, and piece by piece the story evolved, and he was really interested in my album and being on the record, and he said, well, why don't you come over and we can talk and chat. So I went over to his house, which is about 20 minutes outside of New Orleans, and went to meet him, and we recorded everything, and it was honestly like a life-changing conversation to hear his answer to the question and just to talk with him and just to hang out with him and to feel like this feeling of hope, even though he's had most of his life taken away. You know, you just can't begin to imagine how difficult that's been for him. It's just beyond comprehension. So that I walked away from that like a changed man. You know, any of those little grumbles that you feel, you know, after talking to someone that just doesn't seem to have any, it's almost like he's risen above life through spending that time. And in summary, what he says is that freedom, when I asked him what's the cost of freedom, he said, freedom is free. It doesn't cost anything. Freedom, you dictate if you're free or not in your mind. He said, I dictated it at the age of, I think he says 43. So that's like 30 years of solitary in a 6x3 feet cell, 23 hours a day. He said he was free. And that was his victory, I guess, over the injustices and the way he was being treated. Was I guess the only thing you can do. So you set yourself free, or you're not going to get through it.
You lose all sense of time and everything. Like, you know what I mean?
Everything.
Solitary confinement, 23 hours a day. That's crazy. Mad. Puts everything into perspective.
Yeah. So just such an enlightening conversation.
So we're kind of talking about the origins of your relationships and how you've kind of pieced together the album. But you was very involved in Stormzy's debut album, Gang Signs and Prayers. Everyone knows that. He's quoted you. He's referenced you many times. Talk to us about how that relationship began, and be honest, when you first met him, did you think to yourself, this guy's special?
I did. I mean, I'd heard the early mixtapes and I'd heard the early EPs, and the only thing that was holding me back though was that I wanted to make sure that we didn't try and repeat what Kano and I had done on Made in the Manor, and so I just wanted to really meet him and hang out with Stormzy to work out the kind of record that he wanted to make. And he said about the Gang Signs and Prayer and about his concept and about the sonics that he was looking at, and gospel choirs, and it was something that to me that was so different from Made in the Manor. And when he said about gang signs and prayer, it was like a light bulb went off in my head in terms of the sonics of the gang signs being the hardest beats that we could make or find, and then the prayer being like harps and strings and all these like other like worldly sounds that I'm really into, and like the orchestration side of it. So like we hit it off on the first day, and then did a week together, and we wrote, I think, Cigarettes and Kush and Blinded by Your Grace Part 1, and then made the decision to go in for what was in effect a year together, pretty much in our own lockdown. There was just me, Stormzy, my engineer, Manon, and rhymes and flips every single day. And we just got into this way of working, like this routine where he'd show up at 2:00, Deliveroo, packet of crisps, quick cigarette, get down to it, leave at 9, see you the next day. And it was like that for like a year.
A great system which manifested some timeless work that people are going to talk about for decades to come.
I hope so.
Random question. What does the T stand for, man? Fraser T Smith. What is the T? Is it Thomas?
No, it's longer. It's a long one. It's Thornycroft.
Thornycroft.
Yeah. So,
wow. That's quite a regal name.
It's regal, but my parents aren't regal. I don't really know how it came about that through the time. I have to do that. Who do you think you are? Like family tree, kind of study the family tree. But when I did my first remix for Dry as a Bone, I don't know if you remember them. You're too young. They were like in the sort of soul to soul era.
That era, okay.
R&B group, and I did a kind of R&B, that little 2-step remix, or the first ever remix I ever did. And they said, "What do you want the remix to be called?" And I thought, I don't know. Like quickly in that moment, just shortened the Thornycroft to T, and it stuck.
And it stuck. Jeez. You know? I mean, give a reference to the group that you was talking about just there. What are they called?
Dry as a Bone. DRIZA.
Yeah.
Bone.
Okay.
Yeah, they were good.
UK based.
UK based.
Straight.
Soul to soul, kind of collective, jazzy R&B.
So on the 12 Questions album, there is a track called "Is It Too Late to Save the Planet?" And I wanted to ask you that question, man. What's your opinion on that? Is it too late to save the planet, Fraser?
I think it is. I think that the more people talk and the more people question, ask these kind of questions, then the truth will come out. But I think that we've definitely been on a bit of a collision course on the planet, you know, in terms of the stuff that we've been doing, and no one's really doing anything apart from maybe the big companies that know what they're doing, you know, in terms of the emissions. Everyone's just living their life, but really no one's stopping to think, me definitely included, like what our world's going to be looking like for our great grandchildren. You know, is it just going to be this like desert? this you know, I mean, it's serious. So I think it's an interesting question to ask.
It could look all so different in 50 years time or 100 years time, man. We never know.
Yeah.
We never thought it would be like how it is now, maybe like 25 years ago. So we never know. So let's talk about Children of the Internet, the single with Dave and ES Devlin. Dave raps, "It's all connected, nobody's protected from business collectives, your info's collected." How do you feel about online data protection, Fraser? Are you someone who's paranoid about that, or are you at ease with it?
I'm at ease with it. I mean, just from a personal level, I wouldn't sound I'm not at ease, but I wouldn't sound paranoid about it. But it's crazy when you think the information that these major companies hold on us. And when you start getting into have you seen The Social Dilemma?
No, it's on my watch list.
Okay.
So
move it up the list.
Yeah, for sure.
Get it up there. That's really interesting, you know. There's lots of ex-employees talking about stuff. The thing is with this record is that I'm not on any sort of rant. I'm just searching for answers. So I'm interested in what airs and what what Dave is saying, because I don't have the answers. So it's just been the most amazing journey for me to hear Dave's words on this, and to hear about how he grew up, and to talk to him about being a child of the internet or not, as he said he isn't. He said that came when Xbox One came out and you started gaming against people that weren't in your house. So he said that's where people started losing eye contact and people started losing any physical kind of interaction. But then it's amazing how technology is. Well, look, we wouldn't be able to be doing this if it wasn't for technology.
Of course.
You know, I
it's a gift and a curse.
My mum, it is, isn't it? And I think over lockdown, we've all made the best of technology.
For sure.
So it is a thing. But I think with all these things, if you don't use it responsibly, it can just mess you up.
What are the plans for your label, 70 Hertz?
Well, this record's come out on Platoon and 70 Hertz. It's like a joint release, and I want to sign artists. You know, the 70 Hertz started off as a publishing company, and we signed Melee, Javen, Terrell 169, and Lost Boy. And I think the label can develop. I want it to feel like it's a home for great artists that have a real artistic thing that sets it apart from other labels. So you know, like in the old days where you'd play a record by like London Records, even back in the day, like a punk record, and it would just have a certain sound. Or all the amazing hip hop records that you'd hear a record that's signed to Dre, you just know that it was that sonic. I'd love to feel that we could do that and help artists, bring artists through and help them with their careers.
Planet Utopia, the album, 12 Questions is the title of the album. A great piece of work, a great art piece. Do you know what I mean? Many features on there. Idris Elba, Stormzy, Kano, Dave Getz, Arlo Parks, Bastille, Duckworth, former Black Panther Albert Woodfox, to name a few. A lot of commentary on the album. What do you want people to take from the album?
I want people to get into the music, obviously, and to hear like the diversity of it. But ultimately, I want people to ask themselves those questions, because this record could have been written a million times over with different people. I mean, I'm privileged to have worked with all these people that you mentioned on the record and to hear their points of view. But like I said, it's not a soapbox record. It's a record that begs the listener to question themselves, because I think through questioning, then we raise a level of consciousness, and we learn through our questions. So that's what I want people to take away from it.
SK Vibemaker.